This video is brought to you by AKSIAS.
Yeah, good morning. Let me start the session and let me introduce myself. I'm Vivekananda. I cleared my civil service examination 2014 and presently I'm working as an assistant director in Ministry of Defense, and I'll be taking this topic of environment, biodiversity and climate change for you. And today's session, it's an orientation session on this topic, environment, biodiversity, climate change. So it's not that we'll go into subject proper. So idea is to orient you to prepare for this particular topic, environment, biodiversity, climate change. Among all the topics which are mentioned in the UPSC syllabus, if there is any part of the syllabus which we are already familiar with, means we have some amount of knowledge, this is one such topic. Say other things like polity, economy, geography, history, unless you are from the social sciences background, most often it's highly likely that you might not be aware of the concepts. In this case, though you may not be aware of the precise concepts of the subject, but somewhere or other we would have been known the ideas related to environment, biodiversity, climate change, isn't it? See, you often see on your Facebook walls or WhatsApp forwards things like we have to ban usage of single-use plastics, or you must have seen how we humans with our intervention we are damaging oceans by excessive use of plastic, all these kind of things, and how for expansion of roads or widening of roads we often tend to clear trees on, and people protesting against these, and certain people advocating veganism, saying that consumption of non-vegetarian is very much environmentally intensive. All these kind of ideas aren't unfamiliar to us. We kind of know them, but the objective of this UPSC mentioning this as a dedicated part of the syllabus is we'll try to go a little deeper and understand conceptual aspects associated with it. And the syllabus is not at all well defined, at least for this topic. It simply says environment, biodiversity and climate change, and it isn't that each component of it is compartmentalized or we have to read them in silos. Three are very much interlinked to each other. If you know the basic environmental concepts, it will help you better understand the ideas in biodiversity. If you better know the basics in biodiversity and concepts in biodiversity, that will help you better understand the concept of climate change. Understanding the climate change further strengthens your basics in environment, biodiversity. Likewise, there are no hard and fast rules that you have to start from this, then you have to proceed to that. Nothing like that. And this is the first and foremost thing you guys have to learn while preparing for UPSC. Don't prepare in silos, don't compartmentalize your preparation. If you do that, then that big picture you will be missing. So always learn to integrate the ideas, always learn to apply across the disciplines. Then that will minimize the need for rote learning, and you will easily understand the concepts and try to remember, retain them better, so that you can reproduce them easily when it is asked as a question in your mains examination, right? Yes. Having said this, so yeah, let's talk certain things related to environment topic, so that I would want to stimulate your interest and orient you towards this chapter or this topic, environment, biodiversity and climate change. How many of you have heard this term sustainable development at any time? Yeah, somewhere or other you would have heard about this term, sustainable development. And you guys know what is development? In common man language, common man parlance, development is nothing but an improvement, right? Development is an improvement. And if it is economic development, or if it is an economic growth, it's an improvement of the economic activity, improvement of the economic development, something of that sort. Then what's the idea of adding sustainability to it? How can I add sustainability to this development or sustainability to this growth? For you to better understand, I'll explain with an example. Let's say there are two towns, town A, town B. Town A is one, and of course both the towns have a good lakes, functional lakes. And town A decides to have a big industry in the vicinity of this lake, and town B decides to use this lake in other possible ways, wherein it wanted to start a tourism project based on this lake. Now town A without trying to properly understand the possible implications or the possible consequences of having an industry, gives permission for this industry. And what happened over a period of time, in 3 to 4 years of time, of course some amount of employment is generated, some amount of economic activity gets stimulated, and town starts witnessing some amount of prosperity or generating some amount of wealth. But in a matter of 3 to 5 years, the lake in the village got contaminated with the effluents being released from this industry. Whereas the town B, as I've already told, that they wanted to use this lake with more diligence, with more prudence, they have started a tourism project wherein they trained some local youth in organizing some activities, lake based activities, maybe some kind of boating activities, or they would have decided to have a small resort on the banks of the lake, or they would have arranged a good lakefront for evening walkers, wherein they also have started some stalls like that. And after 5 years, town B also more or less witnessed similar kind of economic growth, similar kind of development, and some young innovative youth of the town B also decided that why not allocate one small part of the lake for aquaculture. So they are also using it for growth of some fishes or prawns or other edible aquatic organisms, and they are also selling it in the nearby market. They are making some money, and because of that reason the protein availability of the people in this town B also is good, so there are very minimal nutrition related disorders among its children. Now, and the lake health also is well maintained because they are not doing any activity that can actually pollute or contaminate the lake. So which form of development can be called as more sustainable, town A or town B? It's quite obvious, right? Town B's kind of development can be called as a more sustainable one. So this should take us to one simple idea. The sustainability is based on the premise of intergenerational equity. The idea of sustainability is premised on the idea of intergenerational equity. So what is this intergenerational equity? Let's try to understand. I think this will work. Let's say this is generation 1 in the year 1800. This is generation 2 in the year, say, 1900s, and this is the generation in the 2000s, and let's imagine there will be other generation in 2050s or 2000 whatever. See, these people, they manage to develop in such a way that they have kept in mind the requirements of the future generation. They have kept in mind the requirements of the future generation. Likewise, these people also have followed development in such a way that they have kept in mind the requirements of the future generation. Now coming to present generation, try to understand. Have you heard about this term equity? You must be done with your polity if I am not incorrect. Equity means equal opportunities for people who are equally placed. Equal opportunities for people who are equally placed is called as equity. Then, while we are discussing the topic of polity, we will be more concerned about equity of the contemporary generations, isn't it? In the present generation, we have to ensure equal opportunities to all the people who are equally placed. People who are at one level of socio-economic status, they all must be provided similar kind of opportunities so that they'll try to climb up their socio-economic ladder. That is what you must have been taught about this idea of equity. Then what is this intergenerational equity? See, for any economic growth or for any economic development to happen, something very basic is you have to have resources, isn't it? If you don't have resources, we can't witness growth. It's quite obvious, right? You have to exploit natural resources for you to have growth, isn't it? An automobile industry or any industry for that matter, you have to exploit the natural resources. Only then you can witness economic growth or economic development to happen. As our previous generations are mindful of the requirements of the present generations, they have some concern for the posterity and they exploited their resources in a sustainable manner, we the people of present generation, we are enjoying those resources, isn't it? The fresh air, the uncontaminated water, uncontaminated soil, they have given to us. So we are making good use of this air, water, soil and other natural resources, and we are in a position to enjoy the benefits of economic growth or economic development. So don't you think we have the responsibility of giving the same to the next generations? Undoubtedly we have this, isn't it? See, Mahatma Gandhi says this: the natural resources which we are presently enjoying is not what we have inherited from our previous generations. It is the loan given to us by our next generations. So if you take loan some loan from somebody, don't you think we have the responsibility to give it back? We have the responsibility to give it back, which means we have to use the present resources judiciously and with prudence, and only then you can give them back, only then you can give it or you can pass it on to the next generation or to the posterity. For that, we have to ensure that the growth which is happening or the economic activity or the development which is happening in the present times must happen in a sustainable manner. So the equity is not just among the contemporary people. Equity concept must be applied across the generation. So how can we ensure the equity concept across the generations? Only then if we are exploiting resources mindful of the demands or the requirements of the future generations. As simple as it. So idea of sustainable development is premised on the concept of intergenerational equity, isn't it? So you have to have growth, you have to have development, but not at the expense of depriving the future generations of their necessities or their need to have basic resources so that they can sustain their living. Understood, ma? So that is one simple example of sustainable development and the underlying concept related to sustainable development, that is intergenerational equity. The reason why I started the lecture with the topic of sustainable development is that throughout the sessions, like till the completion of the sessions, we will be continuously using this term sustainable development, whether it is in the idea of environment, whether it is in the idea of biodiversity, in the idea of climate change, in all aspects we often come across this term sustainable development, as it's in session of orientation. So that's the reason I'm not writing much on the board, otherwise I write a lot on the board, and I also give everything, whatever I talk in the class will be given. So stay assured. Then try to talk to me like you heard anything like in the recent times, the impacts of the climate change on the society, anything as such? Any impacts, or have you read in papers this particular phenomenon which we are presently witnessing is because of, you know, the climate change or the global warming which has been caused by human activities or anthropogenic interventions? Yes. Yeah. Today's paper, what is there? I haven't seen it. Yes, glacial outburst. I think it happened yesterday in Joshimath, right? Somewhere near Joshimath. Yeah, I've seen in WhatsApp. So glacial outburst or glacial floods. Sometimes this glacial outburst or glacial floods, not every time we can link that to climate change, but there is a possibility. See, one simple thing, because of climate change, of course we will discuss in much depth and detail about the concept, but common man understanding about climate change or global warming is increase in temperatures of the globe. Increase in temperature of the globe. Why increase in temperature of the globe? Increase in temperature of the globe because of something called as greenhouse gases. What are these greenhouse gases? This carbon dioxide, methane, isn't it? And oxides of nitrogen. All these are some examples of greenhouse gases. And do they occur naturally in the environment? No, it is because of human activity. It is because of anthropogenic activity the greenhouse gases and their proportion in the atmosphere is increasing. Atmosphere means simple, the gaseous layer above the earth's surface, everything above the earth's surface, the gaseous layer above the earth's surface is called as atmosphere. So what's happening to this atmospheric composition? We are overloading the atmosphere with this greenhouse gases. So yes, as this is happening, the natural outcome, the increase in the temperatures of the globes. So when the temperatures of the globes are increasing, what it will have? It will have impact on the ice caps. It will have impact on the glaciers. So glaciers, they would melt. Glaciers, they would melt. Ice caps, they would melt. When they melt, what would happen? Yes, things like this glacier outburst can happen, or another interesting phenomenon which you must have read in newspapers, sea level rise or sea level increase would also happen. And something interesting, one other possible explanation for glacial outbursts or these kind of things happening in the recent times is people are linking it to crop residue burning. You heard about this crop residue burning, which farmers in Punjab, Haryana, Western Uttar Pradesh predominantly they are doing. What will happen because of this crop residue burning? It will release some particulate matter. Particulate matter. What is this particulate matter? It's nothing high sounding term. Ash. Ash is a type of particulate matter, and we have another name for it called as black carbon. We also call it black carbon. It's a kind of particulate matter because of the particular size. It's called as particulate matter. Nothing big concept involved in it. So when this particulate matter gets deposited on the glacier, see, because of the wind flow, the wind flow patterns is such that this so-called, after the burning of the crop residue, isn't it, there is release of lots of particulate matter. This particulate matter will go and settle on that glaciers. Then you must be thinking, what is the link between this particulate matter getting settled on the glaciers and melting of the glaciers? What's the color of this particulate matter? Black in color, right? And you must have read in your school textbooks that what will white do to the light falling on it? Reflect. And what will black do? Absorb, right? And there is another phenomenon called as albedo, which your geography faculty will be discussing. So when this particulate matter or black carbon gets settled on this glacier, so what will happen to the albedo of this glacier? Decrease. Albedo decrease means its ability to reflect back rays of sun decrease, and what will happen? It will absorb the sun's rays. So what will happen when it absorbs the sun's rays? Its temperature increases and the glacier melts. It's very simple. So the particulate matter getting settled there, which in turn having impact on the ability of the glacier surface to reflect the sun's rays back into the space, and absorbing the sun's rays, temperature rising, glacier melting, similar phenomenon as global warming. Isn't it? It's contributing to many other things also. Say people are so linking this climate change to forest fires in the Uttarakhand region and Himachal Pradesh region, and people also linking drying up of the Himalayan springs. All these things will be discussed in the class. Don't get panicked. In Himalaya region, springs are an important source of water supply, isn't it? They're all mountainous terrains, right? In the mountainous terrains, you don't have flowing rivers creating deltas. Such a thing will not happen. There the predominant source of water supply are the springs, small springs, and the source of water to the springs also is the glaciers. And because of the glacier melts, what's happening? The springs are also getting dried up, and when the springs get dried up, again they are being deprived of basic water sources. So it in turn will have impact on the drinking water supply and also impact on the agriculture activities in the hilly regions. Don't think that hilly regions does not have any agriculture activity. They have their own style of agricultural activities. They have their own economic activity, isn't it? That's the reason 2 years ago when Shimla has reported severe water crisis, then governments have announced tourists not to come to Shimla for next 3-4 months that had huge impact on the economic activity of the Shimla, and many people lost their jobs in the Shimla and they have to come and settle in Delhi, as many young people have lost their jobs as the tourism sector did not perform properly in the Shimla. Hope you are trying to understand these linkages. That's how things will happen. Then another good example to further deepen your understanding on the concept of sustainable development. Try to listen carefully. You must be aware, like there is from Hyderabad to Kurnool there is a 4-way road. It's like proper 4-lane road, and this route from Hyderabad to Kurnool, it also has several tribal hamlets now. It also has several tribal hamlets. Hamlets means like they are not as big as a village, but a group of 25-30 families living together at one place. We call them hamlets. Villages means something bigger than a hamlet. Maybe 150-200 families or 500 families live at one place. We call them village. Yeah. And you know what? Without doing proper assessment, or without properly assessing the possible impact this widening of highway will have on the lives of the people, we have done that. And in this process, what happened is that the families or these people of these hamlets, the road is dissecting them, right? Like it's passing right through their hamlet. So people got separated on either sides of the roads, You must be thinking, is it such a big thing they can cross the road, isn't it? Aren't we crossing the roads on daily basis? But yes, it's not as simple as we imagine. And these are speeding roads, isn't it? Vehicles moving at speed of 120, 140, isn't it? And generally, tribals have this habit of taking alcoholism. But it's not that they are used to taking our, Indian-made foreign liquors or foreign liquors. The alcohol they take is brewed out of the forest products like mahua flowers. It's part of their culture now. We should not be judgmental about it, or we should not be prejudicial about it. It's part of their culture because they do lots of physical activity, and the kind of alcohol they brew from natural ingredients like mahua flowers, they are also good for health. They are also enriching. They are also good nutritional source. But now because of some reasons, because of a law, there is a dedicated law which is now preventing tribals from entry into the forest. So they cannot get access to this mahua flowers, and so they cannot brew this liquor which is naturally made. But alcoholism is their natural habit. So what they are doing, they are habituated to alcohol from regular wine shops or liquor shops. And what happened because of this so-called dissection, for many hamlets, liquor shops are located on the other side of the road, whereas the hamlets are located on the other side. And this tribal youth and the tribal men, they have their liquor, especially after evenings, after their work, and in that inebriated condition, means when they are drunk, they trying to cross the roads, they're getting mowed down by this speeding vehicles. The speeding vehicles mowing them down. Of course, few times newspapers have also reported, but the problem is so enormous that now those hamlets, they have turned into prostitution hubs. You must be thinking, what is this? Yes, when young men and earning members of the family getting mowed down by vehicles, getting killed, and they don't have any alternate source of income. Women are not enough skilled to get employment opportunities. Women do not have source to other livelihood activity. Then what's happening? They have to resort to something to eke out their living, isn't it? At the end of the day, every one of us have to live. But they are not given any skills, and the young earning member of the family suddenly dying, you can impact how devastating impact it can have on the lives of those families. And now most of those hamlets turning into hubs for prostitution, and this has been documented by BBC, and BBC has ran a documentary on this particular lack of humanity in development. This is not development. Is this development? Yes, because of this so-called highway, the freight movement between Hyderabad, Bangalore has improved substantially. We enjoy the drive on that road. Many dhabas and good food joints have come up on the road. Yes, but at the expense of what? At the expense of a social disaster, isn't it? Don't you think it's a social disaster? Earning member of the family dying and women resorting to selling of their bodies just to take care of their children is something disastrous. And that's not the development, right? Is this kind of development we all witnessed? Can we call this kind of development a sustainable development? This is definitely not a sustainable development. This is just development. This is just some kind of economic growth. But this economic growth or this economic development cannot be called as a sustainable development. Understood, ma? So with this, the idea of sustainable development should be clear to you. So development is different, sustainable development is different. Got it? Yeah. Simple thing. They should have done this environmental impact assessment and social impact assessment. About social impact assessment, you will be taught in your Indian society topic. And social impact assessment means what kind of social impacts this so-called developmental project would have. Don't you think emergence of prostitution is a major social impact? Undoubtedly, it's a social impact, right? They should have factored in. Isn't it simple things like constructing an underbridge or an overbridge or trying to have one service road? Something of that sort would have definitely saved the lives of hundreds of people, and which in turn would have prevented occurrence of this social crisis, isn't it? And of course, similar idea to that which we will be discussing in our environment is this idea of environmental impact assessment. Means any developmental project before we start, we will try to assess for its possible environmental impacts. Understood? Yeah. Then anything else you heard in newspapers or you have observed or anything that stimulated your thinking? See, because this is one such topic wherein after completion of this topic, if you really get oriented or attached to this subject, this can definitely transform the way we are thinking, transform the way we are doing activities in our day-to-day life. Because I'll just tell this small concept. There is a concept called as ethical consumer. Of course, about this we will discuss in a little more detail when I am talking about the concept of circular economy. But let me quote this for you just to impress upon you that how impactful this so-called topic, environment, biodiversity, climate change, can be, and how transformative impact it can have on your personality if you really like this particular subject. In India, there is a lot of demand for palm oil for cooking purposes, right? Not everybody can afford to buy refined oils from the market. Most of the middle class families and people belonging to poor families, generally they consume palm oil for cooking purposes. And this Indian demand for palm oil is responsible for the extinction of a rare species of ape called as orangutan in Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia and Malaysia. What's the linkage? Indian demand for palm oil, and this contributing to extinction of a rare species of ape called as orangutan in Southeast Asia. What's the linkage? It's as simple as that. See, as we are demanding, Indian consumer, we demanding for more and more of palm oil, then what will happen? The people in those countries where palm oil can be grown, because the climatic conditions of that countries, especially the Southeast Asian countries, will facilitate growth of palm. They can grow palm easily. And you know what people are resorting to? People means like the forest contractors there or the farmers there. They are clearing vast tracts of very rich biodiverse tropical evergreen forests. Like they are all rainforests, because they are located in the equatorial region. You must be aware. Try to recollect that map of Southeast Asia. It's in the equatorial region, right? Very close to equator. And it's in the equatorial region, it has good rainfall. It has good amount of rainfall, so it has rich biodiversity also. Because of this rich rainfall, it has good biodiversity also. And the farmers and the forest contractors clearing vast tracts of forest to grow palm. And when you are clearing forest, naturally who will be residing in the forest? The animals, right? So the animals residing in the forest getting impacted, and yes, that's the important reason why this orangutan species is near extinction. Maybe in another 10 years you will read in papers that orangutan species got extinct. And the reason for it is demand for palm oil by Indian consumers. So the idea of ethical consumerism is shifting the onus or shifting the responsibility onto an individual. It is because we are demanding, the corporates or the companies are producing. If we don't demand, they won't produce. As simple as that, isn't it? We often have this tendency to shift the blame on someone else, right? Say the corporates are destroying the forest, or the corporates are destroying this water body. Why are they destroying? They are destroying because we are asking. We are demanding, so they are doing. Isn't it? We often complain that animals are subjected to cruelty, all these kind of things we must be reading in newspapers, we must be seeing on your Facebook walls and all. Then why are we wearing leather belts, leather shoe, leather handbags? As we are demanding for leather handbags, leather belts, leather shoes, they are producing them. And how can they produce them? They cannot produce without killing animals. And all the cosmetics, most of the cosmetics, they are often tested on the animals now. Before selling or before commercializing them, they are often tested on animals. It's such a cruel thing. Cosmetics being tested on animals for their safety, it's highly likely that sometimes they are not safety, so they'll have an impact on the health of those animals. Some animals also die in this process. So the idea of ethical consumer is shifting the onus or shifting the responsibility onto an individual, isn't it? So there is some of you must have seen this movie. It's a Hollywood movie, Blood Diamond. Anybody saw this movie? Blood Diamond. Yeah, it's also called as Conflict Diamond. You know why it is called as Conflict Diamond? There is a reason. I think I haven't seen that movie KGF, but I got to know that it has a similar story. I don't know. First, let me explain you. We all demand diamonds, especially the demand for diamond among all the countries in the world. The highest demand for diamond is from Indian market, especially South Asian market. And as we are demanding for this diamond, what's happening? These diamonds which are coming from certain East African countries, those countries which are located in the eastern part of the African continent, and they are not democracies like us. They are not. It means doesn't mean that they have a regular governments or regular elections, peaceful transfer of power from one government to other government, strong presence of administrative machinery, good hospitals, good criminal justice system, police, courts, education. Such a thing in most of the countries, they are still in their nascent phase. They are still in that developmental phase, like maybe India in 1930s, 40s, something of that sort. Those countries are. They don't have strong governments, and large parts of the country, they are dominated by this warlords. Warlords means they are the tribal chiefmen, they are the tribal heads. They'll be having strong hold of that locality. They'll be having some henchmen. They are in the nature of gangs, just like you see in the movies, right? That's how they are. And these people, they'll be fighting for domination over a piece of land, so that they can mine these diamonds and sell them to markets of prosperous countries, like some developed countries, and especially countries like India, where there is a lot of demand for diamond. And this so-called conflict, or this so-called, kind of war kind of scenario happening between different warlords of that particular part of the world, it is responsible for killing of thousands of people, turning thousands of children into slaves, women being sold in the open markets. See, it's source for all these atrocities, It's source for all these atrocities, and that is also one of the reason why those regions are never getting developed, because always they are in this boil, always they are in this conflict. So never any governments dare to enter in that region and actually try to reform people. So what's the source? Then what's the reason for that? Is it the warlords or is it the government's failure? So if we try to trace, it will end up at our houses. See, it's our demand for diamond. It's our demand for diamond that is fueling the conflicts there, isn't it? If we don't demand diamond, they won't, try to mine diamond. And when they won't mine diamond, definitely, that conflicts, everything will grow. Conflicts, everything will go, and maybe it kind of, sets a pace for social harmony in those places, isn't it? So that's the reason, of course, in the recent times they have come up with this Kimberley certification. I don't know if some of you must be aware. So Kimberley certification is generally given to those diamonds which are mined in socially sustainable manner. Socially sustainable manner means those diamonds will come from mines which are mined in a sustainable manner without causing any, social crisis like the conflict diamond of East African countries. So in all the examples which we have discussed, whether it is demanding for leather bags, whether it is demand for a palm oil, whether it is demanding for a diamond, so where the buck stops? At an individual, isn't it? It's our greed, rather it's not even need, it's greed. It's our greed to consume more and more, and it's our need to have this, income displays, ugly income display wherein we want to show off our wealth, wherein we have to, have this thing to consume more and more. We call it consumerism. Consumerism means we go to a supermarket, so we will go there to buy 4 things, we end up buying 12 things. We buy things which we don't need. Many times this happens with us. Of course, some of you may be responsible. I don't say that all of us are like that, but the general society is like that. We go to a supermarket to buy certain 3 or 4 things, but we end up buying around 3 to 4 times the things which we actually went there to buy. Why this? It's because of the need. Did the need suddenly appear there as soon as you went to that market, isn't it? Suddenly you got that itch to buy it and you bought it and you bring it to home, and many times you don't even consume it properly. We discard it without proper it's wasteful resource, right? Like that's how we are wasting the resources. Even Mahatma Gandhi says this: earth has sufficient resources to satisfy all our needs, but not our greeds, and it's even more relevant. Mahatma Gandhi also says this: if a small island like UK has turned greedy, what kind of political crisis and what kind of humanity has witnessed? Wars, genocides, ethnocides, isn't it? Then if a big country like India, if it becomes greedy, then we can imagine the kind of impact it can have on the world. So that's the reason, even at that point of time, Mahatma Gandhi always advocated for a simple living, minimalist living, wherein he always encouraged us to consume less or consume to the extent which we need. Consume to the extent which we need. Simply put, he is persuading us to be an ethical consumer. So though he is not aware of this concept called ethical consumerism, but indirectly what he is trying to tell us all, he is asking us to be an ethical consumer, isn't it? Yes. Everybody understood this idea? Ethical consumer? Yeah, it's a very important idea. See, ideas like this, sometimes if we really take them seriously, definitely they can have a transformative impact on the way we do things in our day-to-day lives. Yes. Anything else which you guys have noticed in the recent times related to maybe you must have read in newspapers, or you must have seen in social media or news channels, any major thing related to environment, climate change, biodiversity, which has stimulated your thinking on that particular idea? If you would like to share, yeah, think. Definitely there must be something.
This video is brought to you by AKSIAS.